The 1990s. The decade of baggy jeans, Friday nights at Blockbuster, and dial-up internet that made you pick between using the phone or going online. When MTV actually played music, every kid wanted a Walkman, and Saturday mornings meant cereal and cartoons. I'm 27, and when people talk about the 90s, there's a certain reverence in their voice. Whether it's the music, the fashion, or the attitude, it just felt different. And when it comes to basketball, the 90s weren't just a chapter, they were the gospel. They call it the golden age. But to those who lived through it, it felt more like a revolution. This wasn't just basketball, it was mythology in motion. Every team had villains, every arena had a story, and every superstar felt larger than life. Because while the world watched hip-hop rise and cable TV explode, the NBA had its own global phenomenon, Michael Jordan. He wasn't just a player, he was the standard, the face on every billboard, the reason every kid wanted to stick their tongue out on a layup, and the man who turned basketball into a religion. The 90s gave us everything. The Bad Boys, Shaq, Kobe, Tim Duncan, the list goes on. This was basketball before load management, before the constant fouls, before super teams were plotted in group chats, before analytics told you what a good shot was. You didn't need a spreadsheet to measure greatness, you could feel it. And as the sneakers squeaked, fists flew, and legends were born, something larger was happening. The NBA wasn't just growing, it was taking over the world. If you saw our last era we recapped, you already know we broke down the fast-paced, flashy basketball of the 2020s. But before all of that, before the super teams, Twitter beef, and logo threes, there was this, the decade that shaped everything that came after. This is a full recap of the 1990s. In the summer of 1989, the Detroit Pistons ruled the NBA. After years of clawing, fighting, and getting knocked down, they'd finally reached the top, and they did it their way. They weren't built on highlight reels or smooth ball movement. They were built on bruises, on defense, on intimidation. Every drive through the paint came with a price. Every possession was a war. They called them the Bad Boys, and they were bad to the bone. Led by Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars in the backcourt, the Pistons became the definition of team basketball wrapped in chaos. They were physical, calculated, and mean enough to make the league uncomfortable. And that was exactly how they liked it. They won 63 games, swept the Lakers in the finals, and finally claimed what they'd been chasing for years. For the first time, the NBA's balance of power had shifted away from Los Angeles and Boston. Detroit was the new measuring stick. But the thing about ruling the league is, everyone starts planning how to knock you off the throne. The Lakers were fading, the Celtics were aging, and somewhere in Chicago, a young Michael Jordan was sharpening every flaw the Pistons had exposed in him. The Detroit Pistons entered the year as defending champions. The rest of the league had spent the summer promising revenge, but Detroit didn't care who hated them. They liked being hated. Detroit wasn't just defending a title, they were defending a philosophy, and every other team in the league was getting ready to take their shot at the Kings. And while the Pistons were trying to win another championship, I realized I also had to start winning. So that's why I'm partnering with MH1 to try to become a winner. As most of y'all know, these videos take a lot of work, and procrastinating is like my worst enemy. I'm eating right, I'm sleeping right, but focus has always been my biggest problem. Y'all know how it goes. You sit down at your desk, you check your phone, your emails, text, social media, and then you just get distracted. So I added MH1 into my daily routine, and it's actually helped me stay more consistent and clear-headed throughout the day. What I like about MH1 is definitely how subtle it is. I was a big energy drink guy, and with MH1, there's no need for me to drink it anymore, and I'm sure my heart will thank me. I mean, let's be honest here. It's stimulant free. There's no buzz. There's no crash. It's just that kind of calm and focus that you need to work. I kid you not. Most of these scripts that I have to write for these documentaries take me weeks, and with MH1, it's helped me get a lot of work done each day. It's an easy daily habit. It's literally just 2 capsules a day, and I've seen a lot of people say the same thing, where it helps them stay clear-headed and entirely cut out that 3rd cup of coffee. You don't need it anymore, trust me. I mean, the packaging is clean, like it feels premium, you know? And they even have a subscription where it gets delivered to your front door each month. If you want to try it out yourself, be sure to go to the description down below or scan the QR code on the screen and save 25% off your first order for US customers. Major thanks to MH1 for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to the recap. Isaiah Thomas was healthy and motivated. Joe Dumars was stepping into his prime, and Chuck Daly's rotation had become a perfectly tuned weapon of controlled violence. But as the season tipped off, one thing was clear: the league was not short on challengers. In Chicago, the Bulls had started to grow teeth. Michael Jordan had just come off another scoring title, and for the first time, he had structure behind his brilliance. Phil Jackson's triangle offense was starting to click, pulling Jordan's isolation genius into a system that made his teammates better. Scottie Pippen was emerging as a two-way force. Horace Grant was coming into his own, and beneath the highlight dunks, the Bulls were becoming something much scarier than just a one-man show. The Lakers were still dangerous, but time was closing in. Magic Johnson could still control a game with precision, but the Showtime rhythm had dulled. Without Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, LA felt more human. Worthy and Scott were still elite, but the league had caught up to them in speed, size, and attitude. Out in Boston, Larry Bird was battling more than just opponents. He was battling his body. His back was failing him, and the Celtics, once the league's model franchise, looked like a team trying to outlast time. Kevin McHale was still smooth in the post. Robert Parrish still steady, but the fear they once commanded was gone. Out west, a new kind of team was taking shape. The Portland Trailblazers had become must-watch basketball. Clyde Drexler was flying down the wings with relentless confidence. Terry Porter and Jerome Kersey were tough and efficient, and Rick Adelman's offense turned speed into destruction. They were young, fearless, and hungry, and they were ready to challenge anyone. In Phoenix, Kevin Johnson was blossoming into one of the league's most electric guards. His quickness and poise had made the Suns a constant playoff threat, and with Tom Chambers still scoring at will, Phoenix was built for success. Down in Texas, the San Antonio Spurs had gone from irrelevant to terrifying in just one season. David Robinson had finally joined the team after completed his Navy service and instantly changed everything.
Robinson all the way. Yes, sir.
The Spurs had been a 21 team. With Robinson, they won 56. His arrival was like dropping a star into orbit. Everything around him realigned. He was long, fast, disciplined, and mature beyond his years. Already one of the best big men in the game. In Cleveland, Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, and Larry Nance kept the Cavaliers stable but unspectacular. A team good enough to win 50 games, but not good enough to scare anyone. And in Atlanta, Dominique Wilkins continued to play with violent artistry. Every night, another highlight reel. Every dunk, another statement that he refused to fade with the 80s. The league's future was also being drafted at that time. The 1989 NBA draft had delivered a wave of new faces that hinted at what was coming. Sean Kemp, a high school legend with rare athleticism, had landed in Seattle. A raw prospect, but a future force. Tim Hardaway brought his lightning-quick crossover to Golden State, joining Mitch Richmond and Chris Mullin to form the beginnings of the Run TMC trio. Glenn Rice went to Miami and immediately became their franchise cornerstone, a smooth scorer who could shoot from anywhere. And of course, Mookie Blaylock, Vlade Divac, and others quietly added depth to the league, growing more global and more versatile. As the winter rolled on, the NBA made its annual stop in Miami for the 1990 All-Star Game. It was a symbolic one, the past and future sharing the same floor. Magic Johnson was still orchestrating with ease. Charles Barkley and Karl Malone were bullying everyone inside, and Michael Jordan was in full flight. But even in a game built for fun, Magic's control was undeniable.
Oh, yes. Magic yes. To David Robinson. That's the picture play of the game.
He walked away with the All-Star Game MVP, a moment that felt like both a celebration and farewell to the Showtime era. By March, playoff intensity had started early. Detroit was still methodical, finishing the regular season with 59 wins and the league's top defense. Portland closed the year with 59 wins too, establishing themselves as the class of the West. The Bulls finished with 55 wins, a signal that the league's hierarchy was changing, and the playoffs were absolutely brutal. In the East, Chicago dismantled Milwaukee and steamrolled Philadelphia to set up another showdown with Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals. For the third straight year, the Bulls stood across from the bad boys, but this time, it didn't feel hopeless. Chicago had learned how to fight back, matching Detroit blow for blow. Pippen's versatility frustrated them. Grant's defense neutralized their second chances, but in Game 7, disaster struck. Scottie Pippen was hit with a crushing migraine. The lights, the noise, even the motion on the floor, it was too much. He tried to play through it, but could barely see straight. Without him, the Bulls looked average again. The Pistons smelled weakness, locked in defensively, and finished the job. Chicago had learned how to fight, but not yet how to win. And out west, the Blazers tore through the bracket. They overwhelmed Dallas, then outlasted San Antonio in a rugged semifinal before finally running into Phoenix in the Western Conference Finals. But the Blazers' depth and composure won out. The West didn't belong to Phoenix anymore. Portland had finally taken the throne.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the excitement of the 1990 NBA Finals.
The finals set up a clash of philosophies. Detroit's discipline versus Portland's pace. The Blazers had the talent, but not the patience. Every time they built momentum, the Pistons slowed the game, dictated the tempo, and dragged them into their style. Isaiah Thomas led with precision, Dumars with poise, and Rodman with pure unpredictability.
Detroit has had a lot to do with that. Thomas again for three.
Joe Dumars, playing through his father's passing, turned pain into performance, torching Portland from mid-range. The Pistons won the series in just 5 games. Back-to-back champions. No luck, no fluke. They'd proven that toughness still ruled the NBA.
The game's over, and the Pistons have won the World Championship. Back-to-back.
For Portland, the loss cut deep. They were young, explosive, and fearless. Everything the league wanted in a new contender, but the finals exposed their inexperience. Against Detroit's composure and control, the Blazers' confidence unraveled. It wasn't humiliation, but it was a hard lesson. They realized talent and pace weren't enough. For Clyde Drexler, it was a turning point. He'd carried Portland to the doorstep of greatness and came up short. The hunger that loss created would define his next few years. The Blazers weren't finished. They were just learning what it truly took to win. That second championship meant everything to Detroit. It wasn't just another banner. It was validation of an identity the rest of the league spent years trying to erase. The bad boys had been called dirty, cheap, even unworthy of being champions. The media hated them. Opponents despised them. But this time, there was no debate. Back-to-back titles forced everyone, fans, critics, and rivals to admit the truth. Detroit wasn't just a team that bullied its way to a fluke title. They were a machine that mastered basketball's darkest side. For the city of Detroit, it hit even deeper. The late 80s and early 90s were brutal years economically. Auto industry struggles, job losses, national perception of Detroit as a city in decline. The Pistons became the city's counterpunch, a team that mirrored its people's toughness and refusal to fold. When Detroit played, it wasn't style, it was survival. The Pistons' wins gave the city something to rally around, a reminder that being doubted, hated, and underestimated could also be power. You could feel that energy in the Palace of Auburn Hills. The fans weren't just celebrating basketball, they were celebrating defiance. Two championships didn't just make Pistons champions, they made them a reflection of their city's heartbeat. The season's end brought individual accolades. Magic Johnson won MVP. David Robinson earned Rookie of the Year. Dennis Rodman claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Ricky Pierce won Sixth Man. Rony Sakali received Most Improved. And Pat Riley was named Coach of the Year. This season carried an edge that you could feel. The league was growing up, shedding its flash for something tougher, hungrier, more real. Everywhere you looked, there was tension. Between eras, between egos, between old legends and the new ones waiting to take their place. The NBA was no longer just a game on television. It was turning into a statement. Every city had something to prove. Every star a reason to fight. And beneath it all, the pulse of a new decade was beginning to beat. The summer of 1990 felt different. The NBA was still Detroit's kingdom, but the air was thick with change. The 80s were gone. The league was harder now, louder, younger. The bad boys had proven force could win championships, but their hold onto the throne was no longer certain. Every contender across the map could feel it. Something was shifting. In Chicago, it was time. After years of being bullied, broken, and denied, Michael Jordan's Bulls had reached their breaking point. Phil Jackson's triangle offense was no longer an experiment. It was proven. Jordan had begun to trust it, to trust them. Scottie Pippen's game had matured into brilliance. Horace Grant had turned into a defensive wall, and John Paxson's steady shooting gave the team balance. They weren't chasing Detroit anymore. They were preparing for whoever came next. The Bulls entered the season hungrier than ever. Every night was a reminder of how close they'd come the year before, and Jordan made sure nobody forgot it. His scoring remained unmatched, but there was something new in his approach. A calm, a focus. He wasn't just trying to dominate, he was trying to win. In Detroit, the bad boys were still intact, still mean, still certain they could outlast anyone. But defending a crown takes more than just toughness. It takes stamina, and for the first time, fatigue was setting in. Isaiah Thomas was playing through injuries. Joe Dumars carried the scoring load, and Dennis Rodman's chaos had become both their weapon and their curse. Meanwhile, the rest of the league was growing restless. In Portland, Clyde Drexler and the Blazers returned from their playoff loss with something to prove. They started the season on a mission. Their confidence was soaring, their chemistry sharp, and their style electric. In Los Angeles, Magic Johnson still ruled as the league's most trusted star, but Showtime had dimmed a little. The roster was aging fast, but the Lakers still found ways to win. James Worthy remained steady, Byron Scott reliable, and AC Green was the glue holding them all together. Out east in Boston, Larry Bird was fighting time. His back pain had worsened from the year before, limited him to just over 40 games. The Celtics were still competitive, sure, still proud, but the magic was gone. The dynasty that had ruled half a decade was slowly collapsing under its own weight. And don't worry, new talent kept on rising. San Antonio's David Robinson had already become a superstar in his second year, a perfect mix of power and grace. In Utah, Karl Malone and John Stockton were turning pick and roll basketball into an art form. In Phoenix, Kevin Johnson and Tom Chambers kept the Suns in the mix, while in Golden State, the Run TMC trio, Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin brought energy and speed the league hadn't seen before.
Golden State with 2.5 in overtime. Stolen by Mullin. Here comes Hardaway, leading a 3-on-2 over to Mullin. Puts it up and in, plus the foul.
The NBA draft that summer had also delivered a few new names that would soon matter. Gary Payton was taken second overall by the Seattle Supersonics, a fiery guard with attitude and defense built for the 90s. Derek Coleman went first to New Jersey, instantly becoming their franchise cornerstone. Tony Kukoc stayed overseas but caught scouts' attention as the next great European hope, signaling how global the game was already becoming. By midseason, the league's focus shifted to Charlotte, North Carolina for the 1991 All-Star Game. Magic still commanded respect, but the next wave stealing the spotlight. Charles Barkley and Karl Malone were forces of nature. And Michael Jordan, still the league's brightest star, delivered a quick reminder that he wasn't just flash.
Well, the West will pull away as Michael tries to...
Oh, yeah!
with him.
No, it doesn't.
That was one of your best moves, wasn't it, when you were playing?
That does not look easy to any mortal.
Charles Barkley won All-Star Game MVP, fitting for a player who embodied the league's restless hunger. As spring came, the tension that had been building for years finally broke. Chicago finished the regular season with 61 wins, the best record in franchise history. Portland also dominated out west with 63 wins of their own. Detroit held steady at 50, good enough to defend their crown, but no longer invincible. The playoffs arrived like a reckoning. In the East, Chicago tore through New York and Philadelphia with ease. Jordan was ruthless, Pippen flawless, and the team finally looked complete. Detroit, on the other hand, struggled. Their physicality was still there, but the fire was fading. They barely escaped Boston, and by the time they met Chicago in the Eastern Conference Finals, the tables had finally turned. For 3 straight years, the Bulls had been the ones absorbing punishment. Now, they delivered it. Chicago suffocated Detroit's offense, ran them off the floor, and dismantled their mystique. The bad boys who once broke Jordan's spirit now looked old, slow, and out of answers. When the final seconds of Game 4 ticked away, something unforgettable happened. The Pistons, frustrated and humiliated, walked off the court before the buzzer sounded, heads down, refusing to shake hands with a team that finally had beaten them. To many, it looked like bitterness. For Isaiah Thomas, it was a moment that he would soon come to regret. That single scene exploded across headlines, painted as arrogance and poor sportsmanship. What most people forgot, though, was that when Detroit dethroned Boston years earlier, the Celtics had done the same exact thing, walking past them without a word. The difference was simple. Back then, it was Larry Bird. Now, it was Michael Jordan. And when it's Michael Jordan, the story never fades quietly. Let's head out west. The Blazers' 63 wins during the regular season didn't protect them from the wildness of playoff basketball. They ran into a Lakers team that refused to die quietly. Magic Johnson, playing like a man trying to freeze time, guided Los Angeles past Portland in 6 games. It was supposed to be Portland's year, but the veterans of the Lakers weren't ready to let go.
Right now, what do you want to say to Michael Jordan?
I want to say to my good friend, we'll be there, and I'm just happy that finally we get together in a championship series, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be exciting for everybody.
The 1991 NBA Finals became a clash of generations. Chicago versus Los Angeles. Jordan versus Magic. The sport's most iconic star facing the man who had carried the league through the decade before him. Game 1 went to the Lakers, stunning Chicago on their home floor. But instead of panicking, the Bulls responded with poise. Jordan dominated Game 2 with one of the most iconic sequences of his career. A mid-air switch hand layup that seemed to defy logic. It wasn't just a highlight, it was a declaration, because Chicago never looked back. They won 4 straight games, finishing the series in Los Angeles. As the clock wound down, Jordan held the ball in tears. Finally, a champion. Phil Jackson had built the system, Pippen had become the perfect counterpart, and the Bulls had turned pain into power. The balance of the NBA had shifted for good.
Chicago Bulls have won their first ever NBA championship.
For the Lakers, it simply confirmed what everyone already knew. Showtime had been gone for years. This was just the final echo. The magic that once defined Los Angeles had turned into memory. The players were older, the roster thinner, and the league was faster than ever before. Magic Johnson still fought with everything he had, still orchestrated moments of brilliance, but it was clear the game had finally moved on.
The thing about it is that I can't feel bad because they just given us a nice butt kicking.
And though no one knew it yet, the world was about to hear news from Magic that would change everything, not just for basketball, but for life beyond it. For Chicago, the win changed everything. It wasn't just a championship, it was an awakening. Years of frustration, heartbreak, and humiliation had finally paid off. The Bulls had gone from a flashy sideshow to the new face of the NBA. The city of Chicago, long overshadowed by other sports dynasties, finally had one of its own. For Michael Jordan, it was the moment he'd chased his entire life. The critics who said he was only a scorer, that his style couldn't win, were all silenced. All the pain from those battles with Detroit, the hard fouls, the losses, the questions about his leadership was finally washed away. This wasn't just Jordan becoming a champion. It was the birth of his mythology. For Scottie Pippen, it was validation. He'd gone from an unproven kid out of Central Arkansas to the perfect running mate for the game's brightest star. No longer just the shadow, he was the balance, the other half of what made Chicago so unstoppable. And for Phil Jackson, it was proof of his vision. He'd taken a roster known for isolation and ego and turned it into a masterpiece of balance and trust. The triangle offense wasn't just a system, it was a belief, and this title was its first reward. Together, they hadn't just won a championship, they redefined what winning looked like. As for the seasonal awards, Michael Jordan claimed MVP, Derek Coleman earned Rookie of the Year, Dennis Rodman took Defensive Player of the Year, Detlef Schrempf won Sixth Man, Scott Skiles received Most Improved, and Don Chaney was named Coach of the Year. This season felt like the start of something new, though no one could have imagined what was coming. The league stood on the edge of transformation, a quiet before a storm that would redefine everything. Legends were fading, new icons were rising, and the game itself was evolving faster than anyone could ever see. What came next would shape not just basketball, but culture. No one knew it yet, but the decade ahead would change the sport forever. Quick side note, if you guys are enjoying the video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It would really help me reach my goal of 10,000 subs. Also, make sure you guys go subscribe to our brand new podcast channel, Jay-Z Courtside. That, as well as our Twitch streams, Twitter, and Discord server will all be linked down below in the description. Back to the video. The 1991-92 NBA season began under a shadow. Only months earlier, Magic Johnson, one of the game's greatest, most beloved icons, stood in front of cameras and told the world that he had tested positive for HIV.
And I will have to retire from the Lakers today.
It was a moment that stopped time. His retirement wasn't just an ending. It was a jolt of reality that reminded everyone how fragile heroes can be. The news sent shockwaves through the league, leaving players and fans all stunned.
Well, one of the greatest players ever to play the game won't be playing it anymore. It's been his decade.
And in his absence, a new world was about to take shape. The Chicago Bulls entered the season as defending champions, finally free of the ghost that had haunted them for years. But with freedom came expectation. Michael Jordan was no longer chasing anyone. He was the standard now. Every city, every team, every fan wanted to see if he could do it again. Phil Jackson's system had matured into something beautiful, fluid, unselfish, and relentless. Scottie Pippen was an all-star. Horace Grant was a cornerstone. And the Bulls had a quiet confidence that never needed words. The only real opponent was themselves and the weight of what comes after winning. But the league wasn't standing still. In New York, the Knicks were being reborn under Pat Riley. The same coach who once led Showtime in Los Angeles had reinvented himself on the East Coast. Gone were the fast breaks and the flair. In their place came grit, defense, and controlled aggression. Patrick Ewing finally had a team that mirrored his intensity. The Knicks didn't just want to win, they wanted to make you feel every possession. In Boston, the end of an era was near. Larry Bird's back could no longer carry him. And after just 45 games, Larry Bird would step away for good. His departure didn't just mark the end of his career, it closed the book on a rivalry that built modern day basketball. Bird, Magic, and the golden decade they defined had officially left the stage. In Portland, Clyde Drexler and the Blazers were back with a mission. After watching Chicago lift the trophy the year before, they were determined to claim their own. They stormed through the regular season with 57 wins. Drexler putting together an MVP caliber year and reminding the world that Jordan wasn't the only superstar capable of leading a franchise. Meanwhile, in Utah, Stockton and Malone had quietly perfected their formula. In Phoenix, Kevin Johnson and Tom Chambers kept the Suns alive in the playoff picture. And in San Antonio, David Robinson continued to rise. His combination of size, grace, and humility making him the league's model of professionalism. The 1991 NBA draft had already brought fresh life to the league. Larry Johnson went first overall to Charlotte, and he was an instant force. Power, charisma, and flair all wrapped into a 6'7" frame. Dikembe Mutombo brought defense and personality to Denver, becoming a fan favorite right from the start. Steve Smith joined Miami. Dale Davis brought muscle to Indiana, and a young player named Rick Fox began his quiet climb towards relevance. These weren't just rookies, they were the seeds of the league's next wave. The All-Star game that February in Orlando became something much bigger than basketball. It was Magic Johnson's return, his first and only game that season. When he was voted in as a starter, the league didn't hesitate. That night wasn't about standings or stats. It was about joy, resilience, and pure love for the game.
Some outstanding basketball being played.
Magic Johnson.
Boy, he is really sharp for someone who hasn't played at the competitive level.
Magic stepped onto the floor with his trademark smile, greeted by players who had spent their careers trying to beat him, and now simply wanted to honor him. The game turned into a celebration. Jordan, Barkley, all gave their best, and when the final moments came, Magic hit a fadeaway jumper over Isaiah Thomas, then another over Mark Price, and one more over his old rival. The final shot of the game.
6-5. Three-pointer. Yes! Oh, my! Ladies and gentlemen, you just can't orchestrate it better than that.
The crowd erupted. His teammates mobbed him. Magic Johnson, retired but not gone, walked away with the All-Star Game MVP and one of the most emotional moments in league history.
Maybe you'll see me back, maybe you won't, but I'll remember all these good times this afternoon. I'd like to thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you.
By spring, the standings told a familiar story. Chicago finished first again, 67 wins strong, their chemistry sharper than ever. Portland trailed close behind, and New York, now one of the toughest teams in the league, had carved out an identity built on pain tolerance and control. Cleveland and Boston filled out the East, Utah and Phoenix led the mid-tier of the West, and Golden State's Run TMC trio lit up every scoreboard they touched. The playoffs arrived with a league in full bloom. In the East, Chicago dismantled Miami in a first-round sweep, then overpowered the Knicks in a bruising 7-game war that left bodies everywhere. The matchups were physical, personal, and violent, exactly what Riley had built New York to do, but Jordan refused to bend. His 42-point Game 3 reminded everyone whose league this really was. In the West, Portland survived challenges from the Lakers and the upstart Suns, then outlasted Utah in a tense conference final. Drexler's leadership and Terry Porter's clutch play gave them another shot at redemption. The finals were set. Chicago versus Portland. Jordan versus Drexler. The reigning king against the challenger determined to dethrone him. In the weeks leading up to the series, the comparisons were constant. Some believed Drexler was Jordan's equal. Others called him the closest thing to Jordan. MJ heard it all, and he took it personally. Game 1 was the statement. In the first half alone, Jordan hit 6 3-pointers, more than he'd ever made in a game before. After the 6th one, he turned to the crowd, palms open, and shrugged. The Jordan shrug became immortalized on the spot. The Bulls took the game and the tone of the series with it. Portland fought back in Game 2, stealing a win in Chicago, but the Bulls' composure never wavered. Jordan's control, Pippen's defense, and the team's balance proved just too much. Chicago won the next 2 in Portland and finished the job back at home in Game 6. When the final buzzer sounded, the Bulls had gone back to back. Jordan stood on the scorer's table, fists raised, roaring into a sea of flashbulbs. The league's new dynasty wasn't just official, it was inevitable. For Clyde Drexler, the loss was more than just another missed opportunity. It was a mirror. He had spent years quietly building his legacy in Portland, leading one of the league's deepest, most balanced rosters, only to fall short again on the biggest stage. Losing to Michael Jordan didn't just sting, it reshaped how the world saw him. Fair or not, that final series made him the man who wasn't Jordan. For Drexler, it wasn't about talent. He had plenty of it. It was about timing. He'd run into the best player alive at the peak of his powers, and in doing so, became part of someone else's story. Still, the loss fueled him. He wasn't finished yet. It wasn't the end of his career. It was the spark that made him chase closure. He'd carry that hunger for years to come, until fate finally handed him another shot at a title somewhere new. For Chicago, the win solidified their rise from hungry challengers to undeniable rulers of the league. It was about showing that they could stay there. The city of Chicago embraced them like never before. This wasn't just title defense, it was a coronation. For Michael Jordan, it was confirmation that greatness wasn't just a moment, it was a standard. He'd spent years chasing respect, and now he was chasing history. Every night, every game, every challenge only added to the legend that he was quietly building. For Scottie Pippen, it was a season of becoming. He wasn't the understudy anymore. He was essential, the perfect complement to Jordan's fury. Together, they operated like instinct. One mind, 2 players, impossible to separate. And for Phil Jackson, it was validation of something deeper. His triangle offense wasn't just a strategy, it was a philosophy, one that turned ego into trust and talent into harmony. In 2 short years, he'd taken a star-driven roster and molded it into something timeless. This win meant more than just dominance, it meant direction. The Bulls weren't just champions now, they were a dynasty in motion.
The Chicago Bulls have won the NBA championship for the 2nd straight season.
As the Bulls celebrated their repeat, the league quietly said goodbye to the men who built the foundation they stood on. Larry Bird, body broken but pride intact, walked away that summer. His body had given everything it could. For more than a decade, Bird had been basketball's conscious. No flash, no theatrics, just brilliance. He wasn't just a player from Boston. He was a symbol of what competition looked like when stripped of its glamour.
My basketball career is officially over, and I had a blast.
And though Magic Johnson's career had already been paused for months earlier, the impact of his absence still hung in the air. The joy, the laughter, the light he brought to the game, it was all gone, leaving a silence that didn't feel right. Magic and Bird had carried the NBA out of the shadows, turned a struggling league into a global spectacle, and gave it faces people could believe in. Their rivalry didn't just define the 80s, it saved the sport.
I love you, I respect you, and I admire you.
And now for the seasonal awards. Michael Jordan won MVP. Larry Johnson earned Rookie of the Year. David Robinson claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Detlef Schrempf won Sixth Man. Purvis Ellison received Most Improved. And Don Nelson was named Coach of the Year. This season felt like a farewell wrapped inside a celebration. The league was still shining, but something about it felt heavier, more reflective. The heroes who once built its foundation were finally stepping away, leaving behind a stage now ruled by new faces. The game had grown bigger than anyone could have ever imagined. More polished, more powerful, more global. It wasn't just evolution, it was inheritance. A new generation had arrived, and the torch wasn't passed gently, it was taken. The Chicago Bulls were building a dynasty, but before the next season could even begin, the game itself was about to change forever. That summer, basketball left home. In 1992, the world gathered in Barcelona for the Olympics, and what stepped off that plane wasn't just a team, it was a spectacle, a force of nature, the Dream Team. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Patrick Ewing, Scottie Pippen, David Robinson, Clyde Drexler, Chris Mullin, Christian Laettner. 12 names, 11 Hall of Famers, one mission: to show the world what the game could truly be. This was the first time NBA players were allowed to compete on the Olympic stage, and the rest of the world never stood a chance. Their practices were tougher than their games. Their scrimmages were legendary. Jordan versus Magic, old guard versus new, pride versus succession. But hold on now, beneath all the celebration, there was tension. Out of all of those names that I just named, one was missing: Isaiah Thomas. He had the resume, the rings, the leadership.
I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
And he earned that spot. Two-time champion, finals MVP, the leader who dragged Detroit from the gutter into a dynasty. Yet when the roster was finalized, his name was nowhere to be found, and everyone knew why. Michael Jordan didn't want him there.
No, I did not want him on the team.
Did Michael? Did he want him on the team?
Well, I can't speak for Michael, but I don't think he wanted him on the team.
For all the talk about teamwork and unity, the selection was personal. Jordan had reportedly told the committee that he would not play if Isaiah was included.
Rob phone call to Rob. I won't play with Isaiah Thomas on the team. He assured me, he said, you know what? Chuck that one, Isaiah. So Isaiah's not going to be a part of the team.
And in a league now orbiting around Jordan's gravity, that was enough. The man who had once gone to war with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, the same man who'd beaten both of them on the way to his own championships, was suddenly treated like an outsider. What made it worse was that Magic didn't even fight for him. They had history, friends off the court, competitors on it. But when it came time to stand beside him, Magic chose peace with Jordan instead. Isaiah had built his franchise from the dirt, carved his name through bruises and defiance, and turned the Pistons into a force that changed the shape of the league. Yet the very success that once earned him respect became the reason that he was shut out. The Dream Team was supposed to represent the best of the best, but its creation carried a quiet hypocrisy. The world was about to see basketball's greatness, but one of the men who made that greatness possible was forced to watch it from home. He'd built part of the foundation they were standing on, and now he was erased from the picture. For everyone else, though, Barcelona became a party. Magic was returning from his HIV diagnosis, a symbol of resilience. Bird, broken back to near retirement, was saying goodbye. And Jordan, now the face of basketball itself, stood at the center of it all. Young, driven, already global. The world watched in awe. They saw what basketball could really be. And for the first time, the NBA wasn't just an American league, it was the league. They won every game by an average of 44 points. There were no close calls, no upsets, no fear. But the real victory came in what followed: the global explosion. The ripple effect that birthed the next generation. Dirk Nowitzki, Tony Parker, Pau Gasol, Manu Ginobili, Yao Ming. Every international star who came after them started here, watching the Dream Team. The gold medal was inevitable. The impact was eternal. For Magic, it was closure. For Bird, it was farewell. For Jordan, it was confirmation. He wasn't just the best in the league. He was the best in the world. The 1992-93 NBA season began with a weight of expectation. Chicago was on top of the world, two-time champions, straight up untouchable. Michael Jordan wasn't just the face of the league, he was the league. His dominance had turned basketball into mythology. But with greatness comes exhaustion. And as the Bulls chased a third straight title, you could feel the cracks starting to finally show. Jordan's fame had become something no athlete had ever faced before. Every arena was a stage. Every camera was pointed directly at him. The constant spotlight, the scrutiny, the perfection demanded every single night. It wore on him, but even tired, he was still unstoppable. The offseason had brought some shifts across the map. The biggest came from Philadelphia. Charles Barkley, frustrated and drained, was finally traded to the Phoenix Suns. And in that single move, the balance of power in the West changed overnight. Barkley joined Kevin Johnson and Dan Marley, and the desert suddenly looked like a place where championships could grow. In Orlando, something special was beginning. The 1992 NBA draft introduced the most hyped prospect since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a 7'1", 300-pound phenom with a personality as big as his game. Shaquille O'Neal had finally arrived. From his very first game, he was a force of nature, shattering backboards and expectations. He wasn't just a rookie, he was a spectacle. Alonzo Mourning followed him as the second pick to Charlotte, forming an instant rivalry with Shaq that would define a generation of big men. Christian Laettner, fresh off of the iconic Duke championship runs, joined Minnesota. This draft felt like a rebirth, new giants entering a league built by legends. And elsewhere, in New York, Pat Riley's Knicks had fully embraced their identity. They were mean, methodical, and merciless. A team designed to break your rhythm and test your patience. Does that sound familiar? Patrick Ewing anchored the paint, John Starks played with fire, and Charles Oakley enforced every inch of space. They were by no means the most skilled NBA team, but they were relentless, and they believed that this was finally their year. Out west in Portland, their window had finally begun to close. Clyde Drexler and the Blazers still competed, but the wear of 2 finals runs had caught up. In Utah, Stockton and Malone continued the pursuit of respect, running the same perfect plays year after year, waiting for their moment to finally break through. And in Houston, something was building. Hakeem Olajuwon had quietly become the best two-way player in basketball, and the Rockets were starting to look like real contenders again. The All-Star Game in Salt Lake City became another snapshot of the league's transformation. The sport was global now, broadcasted in dozens of countries, with kids all around the world wearing the same jerseys they saw on TV. Michael Jordan was still the headline, but Barkley, Olajuwon, Robinson, Ewing, and a rookie named Shaq made it all clear. The NBA was deeper than ever. Karl Malone had earned All-Star Game MVP on his home floor, but everyone knew who the world actually came to see. The regular season belonged to Phoenix. Barkley's arrival turned Suns into a juggernaut. They won 62 games, the best record in the league, and Charles Barkley won MVP, finally stepping into the spotlight he'd been chasing his entire career. For him, it was redemption. For the Bulls, it was motivation. Jordan had finished second in voting, and well, he took it personally. The playoffs came with jumbledness. In the East, the Bulls survived wars. They swept Atlanta, then Cleveland. They then faced their toughest challenge yet, the New York Knicks. Pat Riley's team had spent the year preparing for this moment, built specifically to beat Chicago. They opened the series with 2 wins in New York, turning the Garden into a war zone with physicality and noise.
The Bulls had come back from 1 down, but have never had to come back in their 2-year dominance, trailing 2-0.
And then the series shifted to Chicago. That's when everything changed. Game 3 was the turning point. The Bulls played angry, desperate, alive. Jordan was locked in and unflinching, erupting for 54 points. A masterpiece of control and precision. It wasn't just a scoring clinic. It was a statement that the champions still ruled the East. The Bulls won 4 straight games to take the series in 6, breaking New York's will and reminding the league that dynasties don't collapse so easily. Out west, Phoenix stumbled pretty early, falling behind 0-2 to the Lakers in round 1 before storming back to win 3 games straight. They survived San Antonio and then Seattle, each series harder than the last. By the time they reached the NBA Finals, Barkley was exhausted, but driven by the chance to finally face Jordan for the crown. The 1993 NBA Finals told the whole story at once. Jordan versus Barkley, the best player alive versus the one desperate to take his throne. This series opened up in Phoenix, and the Suns came out swinging. Barkley dominated early, but Jordan answered with fury. His 42 points in Game 2 and 44 in Game 3 in Chicago put the Bulls ahead. Game 3 went to triple overtime.
Tiffany has the shot, gets it off, and we go to a third overtime.
One of the greatest final games ever played, with Phoenix refusing to fold.
The Phoenix Suns in triple overtime have defeated the Chicago Bulls 129-121.
But then came Game 4. Jordan delivered one of the greatest performances of his career. 55 points, complete control. It was art and dominance blended all together.
Right here on NBC. Crossover there for Jordan and finishes with the finger roll plus the foul.
The Suns stole Game 5 in Chicago to keep the series alive, but it only delayed the inevitable. In Game 6, back in Phoenix, with seconds left,
Pass it to 3. Yes, the Bulls take a 1-point lead.
John Paxson hit the 3 that sealed the championship. The Bulls had done it. 3 straight titles. A three-peat. Something no team had accomplished in nearly 30 years. As the buzzer sounded, Jordan dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. It wasn't joy, it was exhaustion. Everything he'd carried, everything he'd fought for, had finally caught up to him. He'd climbed every mountain basketball could offer, and somewhere inside, he knew there was nothing left to prove. For Charles Barkley, this was supposed to be his redemption. The season he finally had the right team, the right coach, and the respect he'd chased his entire career. Barkley had spent years being dismissed as the league's loudest personality, the guy who couldn't win the big one. But in Phoenix, he'd found something different. 62 wins, an MVP, a city that adored him. He wasn't just a star anymore. He was a symbol of hope. And yet, when it mattered the most, he ran into Michael Jordan. Barkley played the best basketball of his life, but no amount of willpower could bend destiny. Losing in 6 games wasn't just defeat, it was heartbreak. He later said that he'd never felt more certain that he was going to win a championship, and that's what made it hurt the most.
I'm telling you, it's destiny. I don't care what anybody says. We believe that it's our destiny to win the world championship this year.
For the Suns, it was proof that talent and chemistry still weren't enough to dethrone greatness. They'd climbed higher than anyone ever expected, but in the end, they were just another team that learned the same lesson. To beat Michael Jordan, you had to be perfect. And in 1993, no one was. For Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, this win was the crown jewel, the moment where dominance became dynasty. It wasn't about collecting another ring. It was about proving that they could sustain greatness when the weight of the world was pressing down on them. For Jordan, it meant validation on every single level. He'd conquered fatigue, pressure, and a league full of teams built just to stop him. Every championship before this one felt like a climb. This one felt like control. He had nothing left to chase, no critics left to silence. The world was his, and everyone knew it. But beneath all the celebration, there was an uneasy silence, because nobody knew that this season would mark the end of something, and that before long, the greatest player in the world would walk away. And of course, the seasonal awards. Charles Barkley won MVP. Shaquille O'Neal earned Rookie of the Year. Hakeem Olajuwon claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Cliff Robinson won Sixth Man. Abdul Rauf received Most Improved. And Pat Riley was named Coach of the Year. This season was the height of basketball's brilliance and the beginning of its breaking point. The Bulls had become untouchable. 3 straight titles, global fame, a dynasty ran in ink. But behind the perfection, you could see the weight wearing on Michael Jordan. Every game, every camera, every expectation. It all started to feel heavier than victory itself. The season ended with celebration, but beneath it was something else. The quiet sense that the greatest player in the world was running out of reasons to keep going. No one knew it yet, but the dynasty's silence was coming. The 1993-94 season began in disbelief.
Michael Jordan calls it quits. The thrill is gone, he says.
Michael Jordan, the face of the sport, the man who had just conquered the world, was gone.
I've reached the pinnacle of my career. I've achieved a lot in that short amount of time, if you want to call it short. But I just feel that I don't have anything else for myself to prove.
In October, he announced his retirement. No warning, no buildup, just gone. The timing of this stunned everyone. Jordan cited exhaustion, the loss of his father, and one simple truth: his desire to play the game was gone. But not everyone believed that story. The rumors spread quickly. Whispers that his sudden exit wasn't just grief or burnout, but something deeper. The media swirled with conspiracy. Everyone thought that the league had quietly suspended him for gambling, that his time away was more punishment than peace. None of it was ever proven, but the speculation had become part of his legend. The truth was simpler and sadder. Jordan had spent a decade living in a pressure cooker no athlete had ever experienced before. Every word, every move, every shot dissected under a global microscope. His father's passing that summer broke everything inside him. He'd finally run out of reasons to keep on fighting. And just like that, the NBA lost its heartbeat. For the first time in years, the season began without a clear favorite. The defending champion Bulls were suddenly vulnerable. Scottie Pippen, now the unquestioned leader, faced the impossible task of keeping a dynasty alive without its god at the center. To everyone's surprise, though, he rose to it. Pippen became the best all-around player in basketball. He wasn't just Jordan's teammate anymore. He was proof that greatness had rubbed off on him.
47 seconds left, and watch Scottie get that shot out of here.
But across the league, in Houston, Hakeem Olajuwon was on a mission. For years, he'd been overlooked, too polite, too consistent to dominate headlines. But that season, he became unstoppable. Footwork, defense, leadership, everything was clicking. He was the center every coach had dreamed of. Out east in New York, Pat Riley's Knicks were hungry. With Jordan gone, the East was theirs to claim. Patrick Ewing was still the anchor, but the team's true spirit came from their bruising defense. Charles Oakley, John Starks, Anthony Mason. Those three waged war. The 1993 draft also brought some new hope to a changing league. Chris Webber went first overall to Orlando, only to be traded to Golden State for Penny Hardaway, a move that instantly gave both franchises new life. Penny's poise and smoothness made him feel like a star before he'd even played a game. Jamal Mashburn, Allen Houston, and Sam Cassell joined a rookie class built to change the league's next decade. Shaquille O'Neal's rise continued. The second-year center was now a full-blown phenomenon, dominant, marketable, and fun. The league needed a new face, and Shaq seemed ready to take it. By midseason, Houston, New York, Seattle, and Phoenix all looked capable of winning it all. The 1994 All-Star Game, held in Minneapolis, reflected all of that uncertainty. Without Jordan, the spotlight spread. Pippen earned MVP honors with a brilliant two-way performance, a fitting nod for his quiet takeover. But behind the celebration, fans and players all felt it. Something or someone was missing. The playoffs brought the mayhem everyone had been waiting for. But just before the playoffs began, the unthinkable happened. Isaiah Thomas, the heartbeat of the Bad Boys, tore his Achilles in one of the final games of the season. His body couldn't handle much more, so he made the brutal decision to retire at just 32 years old. It was over. No ceremony, no send-off. One play, one injury, and a Legends run came to a halt. For more than a decade, Isaiah had embodied Detroit's spirit. Small, but fearless. Skilled, but ruthless. He'd fought through pain, controversy, and criticism to lead the Pistons to back-to-back championships and redefine what toughness looked like in basketball. The Bad Boys were gone. Their dynasty scattered. Their leader finally forced to stop fighting. And as the league turned to a new generation of stars, it did so without one of the fiercest competitors it had ever known. I actually got to meet the one and only Zeke a couple years ago. He was an unbelievably nice guy. Into the playoffs we go. In the East, New York fought through every round like it was survival. They battled New Jersey, then Chicago in a series that tested both pride and patience. Game 3 became infamous. Scottie Pippen refused to check in for the final play after Phil Jackson drew it up for Tony Kukoc.
Tony, look out, it's on line. Yeah! Bulls win! Bulls win it! Kukoc with the lifesaver!
Kukoc hit the buzzer beater, but that moment left a scar. The Bulls were still great, but they weren't the same. New York ended up surviving and finally advancing, facing Indiana in a grueling 7-game war before reaching the finals. Out west, everything turned upside down. The Seattle Supersonics, led by Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, won 63 games, the best record in franchise history. Their defense was suffocating, their energy unmatched. But in one of the biggest upsets in NBA history, the 8-seeded Denver Nuggets shocked them in the first round. Dikembe Mutombo's image, lying on the floor, clutching the ball and laughing through tears, became an instant symbol of the underdog triumph. From there, Houston took full command. Olajuwon dominated Phoenix in the second round, then dismantled Utah in the conference finals. His blend of skill and serenity made it feel undeniable. The 1994 NBA Finals gave the league exactly what it wanted. Houston versus New York. Two defensive juggernauts, two dominant big men, two coaches obsessed with control. Every possession was a fist fight. Every basket felt like it took years off your life. Ewing and Olajuwon went at it like gladiators, trading jump hooks and block shots. The Knicks took a 3-2 series lead. But Houston refused to fold. Game 6 turned into a battle, capped by Olajuwon's legendary block on John Starks' potential game-winning 3.
And the Rockets win! The ball was tipped. It was partially blocked.
Game 7 was a war of endurance. Every shot, every whistle, every loose ball felt like it carried the weight of a decade. The Knicks and Rockets weren't trading highlights. They were trading bruises. Both teams shot under 40%. Bodies crashed into the floor with every single possession. Patrick Ewing fought through exhaustion, dragging his team with everything he had, while Hakeem Olajuwon stayed calm and methodical. He finished with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 blocks. Down the final stretch, John Starks tried to shoot New York back in it, but it wasn't his night. He missed all 11 shots, including every single three-pointer. The crowd could feel it. The title was slipping away. When the final horn sounded, confetti fell, and Houston finally exhaled. The Rockets were champions. Hakeem Olajuwon, once doubted and often overlooked, stood at center court as the first player to ever win MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and Finals MVP all in the same season.
All praise is due to God.
For the Knicks, this loss was heartbreak in its purest form. They had clawed their way through every obstacle, every opponent, and came within just one game, one quarter, of rewriting the city's history. But when it mattered most, everything unraveled. This wasn't just another finals defeat. It was the cruel reminder that effort and toughness don't always lead to glory. For Patrick Ewing, it was agonizing. He'd carried the franchise on his shoulders for a decade, played through pain, through doubt, through endless wars in the paint. He'd finally reached the stage he was built for, only to watch it all slip away. For John Starks, it became a scar. One brutal shooting night that overshadowed everything he'd done to help him get him there. For Pat Riley, it was another ghost. Another Game 7 that would haunt him long after the noise faded. New York had been so close that they could taste it, but when the confetti fell, it wasn't theirs. And that kind of loss doesn't just sting, it lingers. For Hakeem Olajuwon on the Houston Rockets, this win was destiny fulfilled. For years, Hakeem had been one of the league's quietest superstars. Brilliant, but overlooked. Dominant, but underappreciated. He'd been questioned, doubted, even criticized for not winning enough. But in 1994, all of that vanished. This wasn't just a title. It was validation for a career built on patience, faith, and discipline. He had mastered the game from every angle. Offense, defense, leadership, and done it without the flash or controversy that surrounded so many of his peers. He didn't need to talk about being great. He simply was.
Well, just teamwork. That's the key. I just like to thank all my teammates for the great job.
Houston had waited decades for a championship, and now they had one led by a player who represented the best of the city. Steady, humble, relentless. It wasn't a super team. It was earned purely through resilience and belief. This win turned Hakeem Olajuwon from an underrated star into a living legend. And for Houston, it was proof that quiet excellence could still conquer a loud league. While the NBA searched for a new identity, Michael Jordan was living a different kind of story. In the spring of 1994, the greatest basketball player on earth was riding buses through the minor leagues in baseball. No cameras, no spotlight, just long days, empty fields, and the quiet sound of a man trying to find himself again. He joined the Birmingham Barons, the AA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox, the team his father had once dreamed he'd play for. It wasn't a stunt. Jordan worked like any other player. He didn't hit the ball great that season, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he showed up every single day. The media turned his choice choice into a mystery. The truth was much simpler. His father's passing had left a hole nothing in basketball could fill. Baseball was his way of keeping that connection alive. Jordan's absence left the league quieter, but it gave his myth room to grow. While the world waited for him to return, he was learning how to live without winning. And somewhere between the dust of those minor league diamonds and the endless road miles, something inside Jordan was finally beginning to heal. And now for the seasonal awards. Hakeem Olajuwon won MVP. Chris Webber earned Rookie of the Year. Hakeem Olajuwon claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Del Curry won Sixth Man. Don McLean received Most Improved. And Lenny Wilkins was named Coach of the Year. This season felt like basketball holding its breath. The game's brightest star was gone, yet the league didn't collapse. It adapted. New heroes rose, old ones found redemption, and the fight for the throne became raw and unpredictable again. Every team searching for meaning in a world without Michael Jordan. And when it was all over, the NBA learned something extremely vital. Although greatness could pause, the story never would. The 1994-95 NBA season began with something rare in basketball. For the first time in years, there was no dynasty, no clear villain, no Jordan-shaped mountain to climb. Every team entered the year believing they had a chance. The Houston Rockets, fresh off their first championship, opened the season as the league's measuring stick. Hakeem Olajuwon had achieved perfection, but defending a title is different than chasing one. The Rockets started off strong, then stumbled. Injuries, fatigue, and internal friction pulled them off balance. Still though, Hakeem stayed steady, playing with the calm confidence of a man who had finally found peace. Chicago, meanwhile, was still trying to rebuild its identity. Scottie Pippen was coming off his best year and had established himself as one of the top players in the world. But the absence of Michael Jordan still loomed over everything. Tony Kukoc was adjusting to a larger role. PJ Armstrong had become an all-star, and Phil Jackson kept his triangle humming. Yet even with all their chemistry and poise, they couldn't replace the presence and obsession that defined their greatest seasons. The rest of the league, though, was thriving. In Orlando, the future had finally arrived. Shaquille O'Neal was no longer the next big thing. He was the thing. Dominant, magnetic, a walking avalanche of charisma and force. Next to him, Penny Hardaway played like poetry in motion. 6'7" with the handle of a guard and the vision of a veteran. The Magic weren't just good, they were cool. Their flair, their energy. It felt like the Jordan era had evolved, not ended. Up north in New York, they stayed steady under Pat Riley, still dragging opponents into the dirt. But the league around them was getting faster, younger, and less afraid of the Knicks' bruising style. In Phoenix, Charles Barkley and the Suns were restless. After 2 straight years of falling short, frustration simmered beneath the surface. Barkley was still a star, but the league's balance had shifted away from him. His window was closing, and he knew it. Out west, the Seattle Supersonics looked like a powerhouse. Gary Payne was the best perimeter defender alive. Sean Kemp, the most violent dunker in the sport. And George Karl's system turned chaos into weaponry. They won 57 games and played like a team ready to own the decade. Utah and San Antonio weren't far behind, both anchored by MVP-level big men, Karl Malone and David Robinson, each hungry for a title that kept eluding them. And then there was the rookie class. The 1994 draft that quietly delivered the league's future. Jason Kidd and Grant Hill didn't just arrive, they changed everything. They were both polished and mature beyond their years. Kidd played like a general, Hill like a veteran in a rookie's body. Their shared Rookie of the Year award wasn't a tie, it was a sign. But for all the storylines we just covered, all the new faces and emerging stars, there was still one constant question floating above it all. Would Michael Jordan ever come back? Rumors swirled. Photos of him working out with Pippen surfaced. Teammates spoke in half sentences. Phil Jackson smiled whenever reporters asked. Jordan himself stayed silent, throwing batting practice with the White Sox organization, appearing occasionally at Bulls practices, but never answering the question directly. Until March 18th, 1995. 2 words changed everything.
I'm back. That's all Jordan said on Saturday. That was really all Jordan needed to say as his 17-month retirement came to an end.
The message came through a fax machine. No press conference, no build-up, no dramatic return special. Just 2 words that instantly stopped the sports world. Jordan returned wearing number 45, the number he wore in baseball, the number his father once saw him wear. He stepped back onto the floor against the Indiana Pacers, and the world held its breath. He wasn't quite the same, his legs slower, his timing off, but the aura was still there. He dropped 19 points in his first game back, then exploded for 55 just 2 weeks later at Madison Square Garden. It was vintage Jordan. For a man who had been gone for nearly 2 years, he looked frighteningly close to himself again. But basketball doesn't wait for legends to get comfortable again. The Bulls, now re-energized, made a push into the playoffs, but the league had already evolved in Jordan's absence. Their second-round matchup in the playoffs against the young Orlando Magic had become symbolic, a passing of torches. Jordan and Pippen versus Shaq and Penny, the past versus the future. Orlando took Game 1 after Nick Anderson stripped Jordan from behind in the final seconds. That was a shocking sight. Jordan, still finding his footing, couldn't summon the invincibility that once defined him. The Magic won in 6 games, sending the Bulls home early. For the first time in years, Michael Jordan looked mortal. That wasn't even the most entertaining series out east. The Eastern Conference had always been a battleground of pride, but few rivalries carried venom like the New York Knicks and Indiana Pacers. It wasn't just basketball, it was theater. And on one May night in 1995, that stage turned into legend. Game 1, Eastern Conference semifinals, Madison Square Garden. The New York Knicks were up 6 points with 8 seconds left. Fans were already halfway to the exits. Then Reggie Miller decided the script wasn't finished yet. A quick three, a stolen inbound.
Miller retreats to the three-point line and hits again.
Another three, flipping the game and silencing the loudest arena in basketball. In just 9 seconds, he scored 8 points. Reggie turned to Spike Lee courtside, hands around his throat, laughing as the Garden fell into stunned silence.
What about Spike Lee? Spike who?
That sequence wasn't just one of the greatest moments in playoff history. It was Reggie Miller's coronation. He wasn't a superstar by numbers. He was a superstar by moments. And in a league full of heroes, Miller became the perfect villain. While Chicago and New York regrouped, Houston was fighting for survival. The Rockets limped into the postseason as a 6th seed, labeled finished by most analysts. But by midseason, a lifeline arrived. Clyde Drexler, traded from Portland to Houston, reuniting with his old college teammate Hakeem Olajuwon.
There it is! 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 Drexler wins it! There it is! Drexler wins it! There it is!
When the playoffs started, the Rockets caught fire. They came back from 3-1 down against the Phoenix Suns. They dismantled Utah. Then came the Western Conference Finals, a collision between Hakeem and David Robinson, the reigning MVP. And well, it wasn't even close.
Down to Hakeem. Trying to turn baseline. I tell you, Olajuwon has David Robinson just bamboozled.
Hakeem annihilated him. Footwork, patience, IQ. It was a masterclass. The Dream Shake turned into a weapon. And by the end of the series, there was only one thing David Robinson can do: nod in respect.
The Houston Rockets are on their way back to the NBA Finals.
And then came the NBA Finals, Orlando versus Houston. Game 1 would come to define everything. Orlando had the Rockets on the ropes, up by 20 in the second half. The crowd was ready to explode. Penny Hardaway was carving up Houston's defense. Shaq was unstoppable inside, and the Magic were just minutes away from seizing control of the series. Then came the collapse. With the Magic clinging to a 3-point lead in the final seconds, Nick Anderson, Orlando's longest tenured player, a steady veteran known for his composure, was fouled. He just needed one of them to fall. 2 of them would seal it. He stepped to the free throw line, exhaled, and missed the first. No problem. One more would do it.
At the line, and Anderson missing on both, but gets to the rebound and again draws the foul.
He missed again. The rebound came straight back to him. Got fouled again, as if fate was giving him a second chance. 2 more free throws. The crowd was trying to will him through it.
They're going to do it by committee, and another miss.
And miss.
And he misses 4 straight. The Rockets take a timeout.
4 straight free throws. The air inside the Orlando arena disappeared. The Rockets raced down. Kenny Smith drilled a 3 to tie it, and Houston went on to win in overtime. That one moment, those 4 free throws, broke something in the Magic. They never recovered. Hakeem and the Rockets smelled fear, took control of the series, and never gave it back.
Houston Rockets have won their second consecutive NBA championship. They have swept the Orlando Magic.
One man's missed opportunity has shifted the weight of history. For Nick Anderson, those free throws became a lifetime sentence. He played for many years after, but he was never the same. And for Orlando, that night became the ghost that haunted every season that followed. For Hakeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets, this championship was something deeper than just a victory. The year before, skeptics called their title a product of timing, of Jordan's absence, of luck. But this time, there were no excuses left to make. Houston had entered the playoffs as a 6th seed, doubted from the start, and fought through every layer of resistance to prove that their greatness didn't need anyone's validation. For Hakeem, it was everything. He dismantled every great big man in the league: Malone, Barkley, Robinson, and finally Shaq. Each series a different masterpiece of patience and precision. There was no longer any debate. He was the best center in basketball, maybe even the most complete one the game had ever seen. He'd reached the top of the mountain twice and done it his way. Quiet, disciplined, and loyal to the city that believed in him from day one. For the Rockets, it meant something personal. Houston had never been a glamour franchise, never the league's favorite story, but now they were undeniable. 2 championships, 2 improbable runs, a team built on trust, toughness, and timing. Clyde Drexler, after years of chasing ghosts in Portland, finally got his ring, closing his story in poetic symmetry beside his old college teammate. This wasn't a Cinderella story, it was a statement. The Houston Rockets had arrived, and for a fleeting moment, the NBA belonged to them. And as Houston celebrated, another legend quietly walked away. Moses Malone, 3-time MVP, 12-time All-Star, 1-time champion and Finals MVP, and one of the greatest rebounders who had ever lived, retired after 19 long seasons. His career stretched across eras, from the ABA in the 70s to the modern NBA, and his dominance shaped an entire generation of big men. He was the blueprint before blueprints, a force of nature built on effort, hunger, and belief. And as he left the game, it felt like another piece of basketball's foundation had gone with him. Let's not forget the seasonal awards. David Robinson won MVP. Jason Kidd and Grant Hill shared Rookie of the Year. Dikembe Mutombo claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Anthony Mason won Sixth Man. Dana Barros received Most Improved. And Del Harris was named Coach of the Year. This season felt like basketball shifting gears again. The league had found new stars, but the past wasn't done just yet. Hakeem Olajuwon cemented himself as the best player in the world, dragging a doubted Rockets team from mediocrity to immortality. Clyde Drexler found peace beside his old college teammate, finally holding the trophy that had slipped away for years. The young Magic showed flashes of a dynasty, only to crumble under the weight of their own moment. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Michael Jordan returned from the shadows, still rusty, but unmistakably himself. And the league stood on the edge of another shift it could already feel coming. Now, before we get started with the next season, the NBA of the 90s didn't just grow in talent, it grew in territory. Expansion was the new frontier. By 1995, the league stretched farther than ever. New cities, new fans, new dreams. The Charlotte Hornets, Miami Heat, Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Orlando Magic had already found their footing. But that year, the NBA crossed the border. The Toronto Raptors and Vancouver Grizzlies joined the league, making basketball's first permanent step into Canada. It was risky. 2 new markets, both untested, but it worked. Toronto embraced it instantly. Vancouver struggled, but the message was clear. Basketball wasn't just an American game anymore. This expansion changed everything. It created space for new stars, new rivalries, and eventually a global pipeline of talent that would redefine the next century. The NBA wasn't just growing, it was becoming unstoppable. The 1995-96 NBA season was arguably the most entertaining season in sports history. The league was alive again. Michael Jordan was back, really back, and the basketball world knew something special was coming. When Jordan returned near the end of the previous season, he'd been human, rusty, out of rhythm. But by the summer of 95, that was all gone. That killer instinct was alive again, and the Chicago Bulls were ready to rebuild an empire. Phil Jackson stayed at the helm. Scottie Pippen was still the league's most versatile force. And then came the final piece. Dennis Rodman. After years of chaos in Detroit and San Antonio, Rodman arrived in Chicago like a storm no one wanted to predict. On paper, it made no sense. His reputation was radioactive. His behavior was unpredictable. But Phil Jackson saw purpose in his madness. Jordan and Pippen saw fire that matched their own. The risk wasn't just worth it, it was necessary. That trio, Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman, was volatile, electric, and unbeatable. The Bulls didn't just want to win again. They wanted to dominate in a way the league had never seen before. In Orlando, Shaq and Penny were growing into superstardom, their confidence unshakable after beating Jordan's Bulls the year before. The Magic entered the season as the East's top threat. In New York, the Knicks were still built on grit, but their window was closing fast. Patrick Ewing remained their anchor, but Father Time was catching up.
He has decided to leave. It is his decision.
Out west, the Seattle Supersonics were a storm waiting to break loose. Gary Payton's defense and Shawn Kemp's athleticism turned every fast break into an explosion. Utah was steady, precise, and ruthless under Stockton and Malone. And San Antonio was quietly building something sustainable behind David Robinson and a young, defensive-minded core. And I gotta say this again, this was not a regular season, because in January 1996, Magic Johnson returned to the NBA. 4 years after announcing he was HIV positive, he stepped back onto an NBA court. He wasn't chasing numbers or fame, he was chasing solace. He wanted the world to see that life didn't end with his diagnosis. At 36 years old, he was slower, but still brilliant. Magic came off the bench for the Lakers. The cheers were deafening. He was heavier now, his legs unsure at times, but the vision was still the same. Every no-look pass felt like a reminder of what once was. Every ovation felt like redemption. He only played 32 games, but it wasn't about stats. It was about courage. He had beaten fear itself and changed the way the world saw people like him. When he finally walked away again that spring, it wasn't in sadness. While Magic Johnson's return gave the sport its heart, Jordan gave it its edge. From November to April, the Bulls dismantled the league. The triangle offense was poetry again, flowing, balanced, and lethal. Jordan led the league in scoring. Pippen filled every open gap, and Rodman devoured rebounds like a man possessed. Even their role players, Steve Kerr, Tony Tony Kukoc, Luke Longley. They all fit perfectly into one place. Every game felt like an event. Every night, the arena buzzed with the sense that fans were watching something historic unfold. By springtime, they were redefining what dominance looked like on a court. The Bulls finished 72-10, the greatest record in NBA history at that time. Jordan won MVP and All-Star Game MVP. This season was shaping up to be the most complete single-season performance in the sport's history.
The Bulls finished the regular season 72 wins, just 10 losses.
But before we get there, the season had its layers, its quieter stories, its shifting tides. Joe Smith went first overall to Golden State, but it was Kevin Garnett, drafted 5th by Minnesota, who truly signaled the league's future. Straight out of high school, unpolished, raw, and fearless, Garnett's arrival shattered a wall that had stood for 2 decades. The All-Star game that year was held in San Antonio. Jordan returned to the stage he had once owned. Shaq towered over the paint as the next great center. Jason Kidd, Grant Hill, and Penny Hardaway danced between all generations. Jordan took home the All-Star MVP, and everyone could feel it. The balance of power was shifting back towards Chicago. In the playoffs, the narrative turned into prophecy. The Bulls sliced through the East like a blade through paper. They swept Miami in the first round. Then came the rematch, the Orlando Magic, the same team that had sent them home a year earlier. This time, it wasn't a contest. Chicago crushed them in 4 straight games, reclaiming their dignity and burying any doubt about who ran the East. In the West, Seattle finally delivered on years of potential. Payton and Kemp bulldozed through the conference, taking down the Kings, Rockets, and Jazz all on their way to the NBA Finals. They were athletic, mean, and fearless, the kind of opponent Jordan's Bulls needed to make history feel earned. The 1996 NBA Finals were billed as a clash of styles. The Bulls' machine-like precision versus Seattle's inexhaustible energy. Early on, it looked like Chicago was untouchable. They took a 3-0 series lead, suffocating the Sonics with defense and discipline. Gary Payton fought to slow Jordan, but it all felt hopeless. Then came Game 4. Seattle finally punched back. Payton's defense, Kemp's ferocity, and their home crowd's fire pushed the series to 6 games. But in the end, destiny doesn't break easily. Game 6 wasn't about basketball anymore. It was about everything Michael Jordan had lost and everything he'd fought to reclaim. The Bulls had the series in control, up 3-2 with a chance to finish the job at home. The United Center buzzed like it hadn't in years, but that moment carried a weight that statistics could not measure. It was Father's Day. From the opening tip, Jordan played like a man holding back a storm. His jumper was steady, his defense relentless, his energy endless. Gary Payton battled him every possession. Shawn Kemp kept Seattle alive, but there was something inevitable about how this night would end. Chicago's lead grew, then shrank, then grew again, until the final minutes bled away and the crowd rose as one. When the buzzer sounded, Jordan dropped to his knees, not in celebration, but in release. He clutched the ball, head buried in his arms, the noise of the arena fading into silence. He'd done it again. 3 years after walking away, 2 years after losing his father, he was back on top, and the one person he wanted to share it with wasn't there. In the locker room, the cameras caught him lying on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, the game ball still in his hands. It wasn't the image of dominance people were used to. It was raw humanity, the unbreakable man, broken by love, loss, and the weight of everything he'd carried to get back to this moment.
This is for Daddy. I'm very happy for you.
That moment said more than any stat line ever could. This wasn't just the return of a champion. It was the return of a son who finally found peace, if only for one night. For Seattle, the loss was bittersweet. They'd spent years climbing, fighting through early exits and frustration, only to finally reach the stage they dreamed of, just to run into the greatest team ever assembled. Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp had given everything, their energy, their swagger, their defiance. They stole 2 games when everyone thought they were finished, but it just wasn't enough. For the Sonics, it wasn't failure, it was realization. They were good, maybe even great, but greatness had a higher price. And for that one summer, Chicago reminded them exactly how high it was. For Jordan and the Bulls, it wasn't just the start of another dynasty. It was the restoration of one that had nearly vanished. For Jordan, it was the moment that justified every decision he'd made since walking away. The late nights in the gym, the endless questions, the whispers that he'd lost a step, all silenced. It was proof that his time away hadn't weakened him. It reshaped him instead. The edge was still there, sharper than ever, but beneath it, there was something new. Vulnerability, gratitude, humanity. For the Bulls, it was resurrection. They'd gone from broken to historic, from rebuilding to rewriting the record books. 72 wins, a championship, the greatest season the sport had ever seen. They weren't chasing ghosts anymore. They'd become one. And for Jordan, holding that trophy on Father's Day, it wasn't just victory. It was everything. It's okay if you cried during that segment, but now it's time for the seasonal awards. Michael Jordan won MVP. Damon Stoudemire earned Rookie of the Year. Gary Payton claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Tony Kukoc won Sixth Man. George Mershon received Most Improved, and Phil Jackson was named Coach of the Year. This season was basketball's rebirth. The league's brightest star returned, and the game followed his lead. Chicago redefined what winning meant, blending dominance with emotion in a way that felt almost spiritual. Jordan found peace on Father's Day. The Bulls reclaimed their throne, and the NBA stepped into its new golden age. It wasn't a comeback anymore. It was confirmation that greatness never truly leaves. It just waits for the right moment to rise again.
The city of Chicago, I'm sorry I was out for 18 months, but I'm happy I'm back to bring a championship back to Chicago.
The 1996-97 season opened with one question. How do you follow perfection? 72 wins in a championship that felt untouchable. Michael Jordan returned sharper, colder, and even more precise than ever. His father's passing had reshaped him. Now it was about legacy. Every night, every possession, every late game moment felt like another brick in the wall of immortality he was building. Scottie Pippen remained the engine that made it all run. The numbers didn't always tell the story, but the control did. He dictated the pace, set the tone, and guarded the best player every night, keeping the triangle humming when Jordan rested. And Dennis Rodman? Well, he was the wild card that refused to be tamed. Rodman spent the entire season walking the line between brilliance and disaster. When he was locked in, he was the best rebounder alive, an artist of timing and chaos. But when his focus drifted, he tested everyone's patience. Missing practice, emotional blowups, mid-season suspensions,
and allegedly kicked a photographer.
And the photographer is hurt.
He even headbutted a referee in March, earning an 11-game suspension. Yet somehow, Phil Jackson kept it all together. The Bulls didn't need calm, they needed balance. And Rodman, for all his volatility, was part of that equilibrium. In Utah, something real was forming. Karl Malone and John Stockton had been partners for a decade now. One of the purest duos the game had ever seen. They'd been steady, consistent, but now they were hungry. Malone was in the best shape of his life. Stockton, surgical as ever, led the offense with a quiet ruthlessness. The Jazz weren't loud, they weren't flashy, but they were lethal. The NBA landscape itself was still growing. Kobe Bryant and Allen Iverson entered the league that year. Two teenagers with entirely different styles, but the same defiant fire. Iverson brought street ball to the professional stage, fearless and unapologetic. Kobe arrived as the heir apparent, smooth, poised, and unafraid to say he wanted to be better than Michael Jordan. Shaquille O'Neal had just left Orlando for Los Angeles after months of lowball offers and public doubt from the Magic. He chose the Lakers for the spotlight, the money, and a franchise that believed in him without hesitation. The torch wasn't being passed, it was being stolen, piece by piece. Meanwhile, the veterans who built the previous decade were finally fading away. Robert Parrish retired after 19 seasons and 4 championships, a quiet goodbye to the Celtics dynasty that defined the 80s. Dominique Wilkins, the human highlight film himself, returns from overseas for one last run before stepping away too. Their exits marked the final passing of an era, the last pieces of the old world finally gone. Off the court, however, the NBA was no longer just a sport, it was culture. The summer before, Jordan had starred in Space Jam, turning himself from an athlete into a myth. Kids who'd never seen him play wanted to be him. His shoes were global, his influence untouchable. Basketball wasn't confined to arenas anymore. It was on lunchboxes, movie screens, and billboards from Chicago all the way to China. The sport had officially transcended. Let's go down to Houston, where they tried one last time to chase another title. They even added Charles Barkley to join Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler, a super team before the word even existed. But chemistry didn't come easy. Their egos clashed, their legs were tired, and their run eventually fell short. The All-Star game in Cleveland captured the moment perfectly. The old guard, Jordan, Malone, and Stockton, shared the floor with the new generation. The All-Star MVP went to Glenn Rice, who hit 4 consecutive three-pointers, also setting the All-Star record of most points in a quarter with 20. As the regular season wound down, the Bulls finished 69-13, just 3 wins shy of the record the year before. But something about this season felt heavier. Jordan's perfectionism was sharper, Pippen's back began to tighten, and Rodman's distraction started to grow louder. What once looked effortless now demanded everything they had left. The playoffs started like clockwork. Chicago rolled through Washington and Atlanta before running into Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals. A physical, heated battle full of hard fouls and bad blood. But Jordan never blinked. He averaged nearly 30 a night, dismantling the Heat in 5 games to reach his 5th finals in 7 years. Waiting for him there was a team built for this moment, the Utah Jazz.
Stockton, open 3, hit it! John Stockton sends the Utah Jazz to the NBA Finals.
Can you beat Chicago? We'll find out.
Game 1 in Chicago ended with a familiar sight.
Now to 1, here's Jordan. Yes! It is all over. The Chicago Bulls have won at the buzzer.
Jordan fading away at the buzzer. breaking Utah's heart. Game 2 followed the same rhythm. Every possession felt like a tug of war. But in Salt Lake City, the Jazz punched back. Malone and Stockton orchestrated a masterpiece in patience and execution. The crowd was deafening, and the series tied at 2 games apiece. Then came Game 5, the flu game. Jordan was pale, shaking, barely able to stand up. He walked onto the floor looking fragile, but by the 4th quarter, he looked immortal. 38 points. Every jumper deeper than the last. Every timeout met with disbelief. Late in the game, with Chicago clinging to a lead, Jordan buried a 3 to silence the arena. The cameras caught him leaning to Scottie Pippen as they walked off the court, completely spent. It wasn't the prettiest performance of his career, but it might have been the purest. Chicago closed the series in 6 games, crowned NBA champions again. It wasn't pure destruction like 1996. It was survival through exhaustion, ego, and pressure. For the Jazz, the loss was tough to swallow. After years of coming up short, they'd finally reached the finals, only to watch their dream slip away right in front of them. Malone won league MVP. Stockton finally had his shot, and Utah's home crowd was louder than ever. It was heartbreak. They'd climbed the mountain at last, only to realize that the summit was already occupied. For the Bulls, this championship reinforced their dominance. It proved that the dynasty wasn't running on nostalgia, but on discipline and resolve. They could still outlast anyone, even as the miles piled up. For Jordan, winning while sick, tired, and chased by the league's best showed that he wasn't just better than everyone else. He was built differently. This one wasn't about numbers or records. It was about endurance and the ultimate refusal to ever let go of that crown. And now for the individual awards. Karl Malone won league MVP. Allen Iverson earned Rookie of the Year. Dikembe Mutombo claimed Defensive Player of the Year. John Starks won Sixth Man. Isaac Austin received Most Improved. And Pat Riley was named Coach of the Year. This season was the peak of an era. The Bulls were still the league standard, even as the weight of time and expectation began to show. Utah finally earned its place among the greats, and a new generation, Iverson, Kobe, and Garnett, started to reshape what the future would look like. The veterans of the 80s were gone. The rookies of the next century had arrived, and Jordan stood in the middle, still the measure of them all. The league was changing, but for now, it still belonged to him.
Before you get out of here, Phil, see, it was so much fun this time. We're going to do it again next year?
Oh, man. I don't know. 3 times is nice. I know that.
The 1997-98 season didn't begin like another title defense. It began like a countdown. Everyone in Chicago knew it. They just refused to say it out loud. The tension between head coach Phil Jackson and general manager Jerry Krause had become impossible to hide. Krause, who'd been credited with building the dynasty, now wanted credit for rebuilding it without the people who made it great. He told Phil Jackson before the season even began, "You could go 82-0 and you're still not coming back." That one sentence changed everything. Phil called it.
So I called it The Last Dance.
Scottie Pippen, the league's most underpaid superstar, was furious. For years, he'd made less than role players across the league. Locked into a bad contract he signed early for family security. Now, as his back flared up and trade rumors circled, he wanted out.
I'm not going to play there anymore, and that's that. And I have that freedom and I have that right to do that.
He missed the first half of the season recovering from surgery and made it clear if the Bulls didn't value him, he wouldn't save them. While Pippen sat, Jordan carried everything. At 35 years old, every night, every possession, every shot still ran through him. He was playing chess in an era full of checkers. Dennis Rodman was still rebounding like a madman, but even he was fraying. He needed chaos to feel alive. When the structure cracked, he disappeared. He literally left the team mid-season, flying to Las Vegas for a bender that ended with him showing up on national TV at a wrestling event. Somehow, he came back and they kept winning. The Bulls were older, slower, but smarter. They played like champions who knew exactly when to strike. And around them, Karl Malone and John Stockton were still hunting redemption in Utah. Shaquille O'Neal and a young Kobe Bryant were rising in Los Angeles. But while Chicago's dynasty was fighting to hold together, a new rookie class had entered the league. Tim Duncan, the #1 pick, was everything the Spurs had hoped for. Calm, consistent, and impossibly mature. He immediately paired with David Robinson to form a formidable duo, giving San Antonio the structure of a dynasty waiting to happen. Chauncey Billups struggled early in Boston, but flashes of leadership hinted at what he'd eventually become. Tracy McGrady, still a teenager, arrived in Toronto, raw but fearless. And Keith Van Horn, Antonio Daniels, all showed the depth of a league constantly refreshing itself. Jordan was still the king, but the kingdom's heirs had arrived. The regular season was a grind. Chicago finished 62-20, but every win felt heavier than the last. Phil Jackson's calm masked exhaustion. Jordan's smile masked defiance. The locker room was divided between loyalty and uncertainty. And before we get into the playoffs, something that would end up changing the world forever happened in in March of 1998. I was born, so shout out to me. Yo, if y'all are still watching, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, please. It would really mean the world. Anyways, then came the playoffs. Chicago opened against the New Jersey Nets. Routine sweep, business as usual. Then they faced the Charlotte Hornets. Armstrong's Game 2 heroics gave the Hornets a rare win. And in his celebration, screaming in front of Chicago's bench, that became personal to Michael Jordan because he didn't forget that. The Bulls closed them out in 5 games. Every possession was a quiet reminder of what revenge looked like.
BJ kind of forgot, about us, what drives us. We utilized that energy that he used at the end of Game 2 to our advantage, and we're good at that. So, he woke us up.
In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls met with the Indiana Pacers. Reggie Miller and the Pacers were no longer just underdogs. They were real threats. Game 4 in Indiana became a war. With seconds left, Miller shoved Jordan, freed himself.
Gets it in the middle for the win. It's there! 0.4 of a second.
And buried a 3 to steal the win. The crowd exploded and Jordan glared. The series went to 7 games, the first time in years the Bulls were pushed that far. In Game 7, Chicago barely survived. Jordan dropped 28, Pippen gutted through back pain, Rodman battled on the boards, and they held off Indiana 88-83. Then came the finals, Chicago versus Utah, the rematch. The Jazz had home court and revenge in their hearts. The Bulls had fatigue and history. Game 1 went to Utah, a grind that ended in an overtime. Then Chicago stole Game 2 behind Jordan's 37 and Pippen's defense. Back in Chicago, the Bulls suffocated Utah in Game 3, holding them to 54 points in total, still the lowest in finals history. They won Game 4, lost Game 5 at home, and flew to Utah up 3-2 with everything on the line. Game 6 was not just a basketball game, it was a closing act. Pippen's back gave out in the opening minutes. He could barely stand. He tried, he limped, he left, he returned, but he was done. So Jordan carried everything. Every rebound, every possession, every hope in the city of Chicago rested on him.
Cross court Stockton, a 3, it's there!
The Jazz led by 3 with under a minute left. Jordan drove, finished through contact, 1-point game. And with 10 seconds left, history froze.
10, Jordan a drive, hangs, fires. He scores! Chicago with the lead!
Jordan crossed over Brian Russell, pulled up from the free throw line, and released the shot that would define a generation. Chicago 87, Utah 86. 6 titles in 8 years. The perfect ending. No flex, no smile, just a single fist raised in silence.
The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship.
For the Utah Jazz, this loss meant everything. They had built a team that looked every bit ready to win it all. Stockton and Malone in their prime, home court advantage, momentum. But in the final seconds, they watched that crown slip away. For Jordan, it was the perfect ending to the story he'd been writing since 1984. Not just control over the game, but closure over everything that came before it. There were no critics left to silence, no rivals left to chase. That shot over Brian Russell wasn't just another game winner. It was the final brushstroke on a masterpiece. After years of pressure, conflict, and expectation, he found his peace in the quiet after the shot. For Pippen, it was vindication. After years of being underpaid and undervalued, he'd still given everything his body had left. His back fully gave out, but his reputation stood tall. The league finally had to recognize that Jordan's empire could not have existed without him. And for the Bulls, this win was both triumph and a farewell. 6 championships in 8 years. Everyone built on precision, trust, and resilience. But this one carried a lot of weight. The kind that comes with knowing that it's the last of its kind. That final fist pump wasn't celebration. It was acceptance. They hadn't just reached the top again. They'd finished the story exactly how they wanted it told. As for the individual accolades, Michael Jordan claimed his 5th MVP award. Tim Duncan earned Rookie of the Year. Dikembe Mutombo took Defensive Player of the Year. Danny Manning won 6-man. Allen Henderson received Most Improved. And Larry Bird was named Coach of the Year. This season felt different from the start, as if everyone in Chicago understood something unspoken. The Bulls weren't chasing history anymore. They were holding on to it. The team was older, the tension heavier, but somehow that fire still burned. They fought through injuries, rumors, and exhaustion, then finished the story on their own terms. Jordan's final shot in Utah became the image of the decade. Pure, precise, untouchable. And when the confetti settled, Jordan stood still a little longer than usual. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew something was coming to an end. The 1998-99 season felt strange from the start. The league had just witnessed a perfect ending, and now it was trying to begin again. It felt like the credits had already rolled, yet everyone was still sitting in their seats, waiting to see what could possibly come next. But basketball didn't start right away. The summer turned into autumn, the autumn into winter, with no NBA games played. A lockout froze the NBA for 204 days, the longest work stoppage in league history. Players and owners were locked in dispute, fans were left waiting, and the momentum that carried the game through the 90s suddenly hit pause. When the season finally began in January, it was just 50 games long, short, condensed, and chaotic. The basketball was sloppy, the rhythm was off, but the emotion was still there. Only this time, something felt different. Because the Chicago Bulls, the team that had ruled the sport for nearly a decade, were gone. Phil Jackson had walked away. Scottie Pippen was traded to Houston. Dennis Rodman was released. And Michael Jordan, the heartbeat of it all, had stepped away again.
I am here to announce my retirement from the game of basketball. It won't be another announcement to baseball or anything to that nature.
No farewell tour, no cameras, no parade. He left just as he arrived, on his own terms. Jordan's absence wasn't just felt in Chicago. It reshaped the entire league. The man who had spent a decade defining greatness had left a void too large to fill. Every player who touched the basketball that season felt it. The unspoken pressure of existing in the shadow of the one who had done it better than anyone else. And whether people wanted to admit it or not, the NBA without him felt smaller. Even the silence sounded different, but the NBA season kept on going. New stars began to rise through the cracks. In Toronto, Vince Carter took the league by storm, soaring and dunking in ways that made fans remember why they fell in love with the game in the first place. In Boston, Paul Pierce looked ready before anyone expected him to be. In Dallas, a lanky kid from Germany named Dirk Nowitzki quietly adjusted to the NBA's pace, his awkwardness hinting at brilliance. Jason Williams turned every Kings game into a highlight reel. Mike Bibby, Anton Jameson, and Larry Hughes were learning fast. Even in the choppy, unsteady rhythm of this lockout year, the next generation had arrived. But some familiar faces still clung to the spotlight. Karl Malone, still relentless. Alonzo Mourning, a wall in the paint. Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, still figuring each other out in Los Angeles, trying to balance raw power and rising ambition. Patrick Ewing, nearing the end but still fighting. And somewhere beneath it all, in every arena, the ghost of the Chicago Bulls hovered in silence. The Bulls took the floor that season with new faces, new jerseys, and no direction. What had once been precision turned into confusion. The energy, the swagger, it was all gone. The league moved forward, but you could feel what was missing. As the regular season unfolded, the East was chaos. The West was control. The New York Knicks stumbled early, plagued by injuries and doubt, but somehow found their rhythm late. Latrell Sprewell, the league's newest redemption story, joined Allen Houston to give the Knicks new life. In Miami, Alonzo Mourning anchored the best defense in basketball, but fate had other plans. In Indiana, Reggie Miller still burned for the finals that had always escaped him. Out West, a calm began to form in San Antonio. David Robinson had waited years for help, and he finally had it. Tim Duncan was just in his second season, but he played with the patience of someone who had seen it all before. He never rushed, never flinched, never forced. Every shot, every rebound, every rotation came with a quiet strength. While others played for attention, the Spurs played for focus. And slowly, almost unnoticed, they started winning everything. When the playoffs arrived, the league felt reborn. There were no Bulls. There was no Jordan. There was no familiar script. Just uncertainty and the chance for someone else to write a new story. The Knicks entered as the 8th seed, barely squeaking in. But when the lights turned on, something clicked. Allen Houston's game winner in Miami sealed one of the biggest upsets in playoff history.
Allen Houston ducks under. Got it! With 8/10 left.
Then came Atlanta, gone in 4. Then Indiana, in a war of wills that ended with Larry Johnson's 4-point play igniting Madison Square Garden like it hadn't been in years. New York was suddenly back, and waiting for them were the San Antonio Spurs. The finals brought two completely different worlds together. New York, the scrappy underdog built on emotion and grit, versus San Antonio, the model of composure and precision. An 8th seed against a team that had quietly mastered the art of winning. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, but it did. The Knicks entered the series battered, but proud. Patrick Ewing's body had finally betrayed him. His Achilles couldn't take it anymore. He watched from the bench in street clothes, trying to hide the heartbreak in his eyes. Allen Houston carried the scoring load, while Latrell Sprewell became the soul of the team. Under Jeff Van Gundy, New York leaned into its identity: scrappy defense, physical play, and a refusal to fold. Game 1 in San Antonio made one thing clear: the Spurs were different. David Robinson's discipline set the tone, and Tim Duncan played with the calm of someone twice his age. His footwork, his patience, his timing, it all felt effortless. The Spurs' size overwhelmed New York, and they took the opener with a quiet authority. Game 2 was tighter. Houston found his rhythm. Sprewell attacked relentlessly, and the Knicks hung around until the final minutes. But every time they got close, Duncan answered. Mid-range jumpers, turnarounds off the glass, defensive stops that deflated the crowd. The Spurs had never looked so strong before. When the series shifted to New York, Madison Square Garden roared like it was trying to will the team back into history. Game 3 was electric. Sprewell scored 32. Houston hit clutch shots, and the Knicks finally broke through. That building shook as if it could bring Patrick Ewing back onto the floor by sheer noise alone. For a brief moment, it felt like anything was possible, but San Antonio never panicked. Game 4 belonged to Robinson and Duncan. That tag team dominated the paint, blocking shots, forcing misses, and reclaiming control. The Knicks were running on fumes. The Spurs looked unbothered. Game 5 ended this story. Sprewell scored 35 and fought until the final buzzer, but Duncan's brilliance was just too much, earning Finals MVP at just 22 years old. The Spurs celebrated their first championship, not with a wild celebration, but with composure, the kind of satisfaction that comes from doing things the right way. For the Knicks, this loss cut deep. That run had been improbable right from the start. A battered 8th seed clawing its way through the East, defying odds and injuries at every turn. For a moment, it felt like New York might finally capture the storybook ending the city had been chasing since the days of Clyde and Reed, but the Spurs ended the dream before it could become history. Patrick Ewing's body was breaking down, and that series marked his last real chance at a ring. Sprewell and Houston became instant heroes, but they could never recapture that magic again. The Knicks walked off the floor proud but hollow, knowing how rare those chances really are. And decades later, that night in 1999 still stands as their last trip to the NBA Finals, a reminder of how close they came and how far away it's felt ever since. For David Robinson, it was a release years in the making. He'd spent his prime carrying a small market team that never quite had enough. This championship validated everything he'd built: the leadership, the patience, the integrity. It proved that quiet greatness could win just as powerfully as the loud kind. For Tim Duncan, it was the beginning of a legacy that would stretch for decades. He wasn't emotional, he was not loud, and he never chased the spotlight. These finals confirmed what San Antonio already knew: Tim Duncan was the future. And for the Spurs, this title was not just a win. A small franchise that had once been overlooked and finally became the model of how to build and sustain excellence. In a league adjusting to life without Michael Jordan, San Antonio didn't try to fill the void with noise or ego. They filled it with balance, humility, and basketball played the right way. And finally, for our last seasonal awards, Karl Malone earned MVP. Vince Carter won Rookie of the Year. Alonzo Mourning claimed Defensive Player of the Year. Darrell Armstrong captured both Six-Man and Most Improved honors, and Mike Dunleavy was named Coach of the Year. The 1990s were something different. Basketball wasn't just entertainment. It was war, poetry, and evolution all at once. Every night had a story. Every team had a rival. Every champion had scars. This was the NBA's golden age, where heroes were larger than life, and the game itself felt sacred. It was the decade of Michael Jordan, of 6 rings, 2 retirements, and a shadow that still covers the sport today. But it was also the decade of everyone who tried to chase him. The Barkleys, the Ewings, the Millers, the Malones, the ones who got close, only to run into someone that they just could not overcome. You didn't just watch the 90s, you lived them. You felt every shove, every stare down, every jumper that rattled in or broke a city's heart. It was the decade that built legacies and destroyed egos, that turned sneakers into culture and players into myths. So yeah, call it physical, call it gritty, call it old school, but don't ever forget one important thing: it was beautiful. Because the 1990s didn't just define basketball, they defined greatness. And if you made it to the very end, do me a ginormous favor. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to check out our podcast channel, Jay-Z Courtside, for daily NBA news and drama all season long. This video took me so long to make. I never did so much research on one project before. If you enjoyed and want to watch me recap another era, be sure to click on one of the videos that are on the screen right now. Thank you again to MH1 for sponsoring today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.